During my build videos or even some of my live streams, I will keep receiving these comments or, mentions in chat, and they go something like this. Hey, Kami, just now coming back after a couple years off, and I'm really getting back into the game. What are the newest, talents for my gear or for my weapons to use nowadays? What is the current meta or metas? What is the best thing for skill builds or tank builds or this or that? Or I'll get something during a build video like, well, if I don't like this talent, is there a substitute for it? And if not, why not? So in today's video, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to compile all of those things into one massive info dump. If you're used to the military or any sort of government agency, you would know the term information by fire hose. And that's what we're going to do in today's video. I'm going to tell you all of the best talents to use in the game right now, 2024. So I hope you enjoy, and well, grab that popcorn. Here we go. What's going on, YouTube? Kamikazevondoom here with another Division 2 video, so sit back, relax, grab that popcorn, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know what you think in the comments section below. But in today's video, I'm going to give you the best talents to use and why. So I hope you enjoy. Now we're going to start off in different categories. That way it's easier to follow along, and I'm not just going to go this talent, this talent, this talent. We're going to come up with different situations and different builds, and I'll explain to you exactly why these talents are being used and why they would be a better option than X, Y, or Z. So I hope you enjoy. Now, starting with, let's just start with weapons, okay? Because weapons are going to be your easier one to go over before we start talking about backpacks and chest pieces. So, and we'll finish up with exotics. So we'll do weapons, gear, and then we'll do exotics at the end, okay? So first up, weapon talents. Now, again, we'll do exotics at the end of the weapon talents, but let's just talk about normal weapon talents first. Now, right off the bat, it is situational. It is up to your build on what kind of talent you want to use and why. For example, here is a black market AKM. It is notorious for shooting very slow. So what I have on here is a talent that would actually work best with a type of weapon like this, and that is strained. So strained, you can gain 10% crit hit damage for every 0.5 seconds shooting your weapon. And this can stack up to 5 times. So you can get an additional 50% crit hit damage just by shooting a slow rate of fire weapon. And that's exactly why it's on a AKM, because the AKM only has a 600 RPM, which makes it one of the slowest ARs in the game. So having something like strained on there would mean as you're face tanking or shooting this weapon, by the time you're at the end of that magazine, you're going to be hitting really, really hard. I mean, plus 50% crit hit damage is ridiculous. Just have near max crit chance and you're good to go. It's crazy how strong this talent is. You can use it on ARs, you can use it on SMGs, you can use it on LMGs. As long as it's a slow firing weapon, you're good to go. Because remember, this is while firing. So you don't want this on like a vector where you shoot through the whole thing in 0.5 seconds because you're not going to be able to, get used to all of that extra crit hit damage. Whereas you could throw a military AKM on like, say, a tank build, and then you could just go ham with all that extra crit. Next up, we would have something like Flatline, okay? Now, Flatline is a amplified damage bonus talent that is only applied to pulsed enemies. Now, this is a weapon talent that is typically used with something like the Technician Specialization or Spotter/Perfect Spotter. Reason for that is because you want something with good synergy to go around damage against pulsed enemies. Using something like the Technician Specialization will give you that opportunity to run the linked laser pointer. Now you can see right here it says the Technician laser pointer that pulses targets. You can only have this available if you are running that specialization. Now again, Flatline it amplifies your weapon damage, but you want this on a weapon that has the long underbarrel rail attachment slot. That is crucial for running the linked laser pointer. So a lot of people you will see will only run flatline on weapons that have this long underbarrel rail attachment slot so that they could put this linked laser pointer on there and pulse their enemies. Now, flatline is one of the hardest hitting weapon talents in the game, so definitely look at using this weapon talent. Now, the weapons that I typically use with it would be the Carbine 7, the Kingbreaker because it comes with the perfect flatline variant, or you could have something like the Police M4 that has the long underbarrel rail. All of those things are perfect for using flatline. Now, you could also use it on SMGs and shotguns. Now, the shotgun one, I use that for, like, say, Heartbreaker or Striker. You want to use like the ACS 12 with flatline. That way you can pulse them, get that extra damage, and you're gaining stacks all at the same time. Then you can switch back to, like, say, the Carbine 7, Police M4, Kingbreaker, or even the Vector 45 ACP. As long as it has that long underbarrel rail attachment slot and the linked laser pointer, you can utilize that amplified damage and go really hard into the damage category. Now, the Vector with flatline is one of my favorites just because of the burst damage it does as soon as that enemy is pulsed. It is amazing. Okay, now let's get off of flatline. Okay, next up, I'm going to talk about a nice way to get all the weapons you want exactly the way you want. Okay, now I'm going to use my FAMAS for example. So right here, my FAMAS, it has damage to targets out of cover as that, bottom attribute, and that gives me the opportunity to recalibrate the talent for whatever talent I want. Now this makes it amazing because what you can do now is you can go down to that talent and say I want to use it on a armor on kill build. I could use preservation. Say I just want to use it on a pure damage build. I could put on optimist. Say I want to just run into their face with, like, I don't know, Hunter's Fury or something crazy. You could do close and personal. Say you wanted to use it with a status build. You could use vindictive. Say you just want that amplified damage. You want to try to beam people from, far away. You could use ranger. Get that amplified damage from ranger. Things like this. Now, that makes it perfect. Now, this is the perfect weapon combination that I would say you need to go for all of your weapons. You want that AR health, damage targets out of cover, and then that way you could recalibrate your talent for whatever it is you want, and then you could keep this one weapon and use it for all of those different type of builds. Now, for this one, you can see I have Sadist on here, and that's because I was using it with a Ridgeway's Pride and a Wicked combination for a build for, like, more of a status / weapon damage build. Now, I'll show that whenever I talk about the weapon or the gear talents, but right now we're just trying to focus on these weapon talents and things to look for. Now, another great one, Optimist or Perfect Optimist. Now, the problem is that Perfect Optimist is only on the Shield Splinterer. Now, the only way to get the Shield Splinterer is you have to take down all of the Year 1 Hunters and open up the Ivory Chest to even receive this weapon. So Perfect Optimist might not be an option for you. However, Optimist is a great option for a weapon because the less ammo you have in your magazine, the harder that weapon is going to hit. So unlike Strained, where you want to have like a low RPM weapon to gain all of that damage, Optimist is quite the opposite. You want a high RPM weapon. That way you could get through that magazine size as quickly as possible. That way you can gain that extra weapon damage as quickly as possible. So that's why something like the Shield Splinterer, you can see the RPM is 900. Unlike that AKM I showed you with a RPM of only 600. So you can see why Optimus would be a better, fit here rather than something like Strained. Now, as far as skill builds, one of the best talents to use for skill builds is In Sync, or in this case, Perfectly In Sync. Now, Perfectly In Sync is only on the Test Subject and Harmony. Now, remember, Harmony is a rifle, and the Test Subject is an assault rifle. Now, for me personally, I much rather use the test subject over the Harmony, but that's just me personally. I'm more of an AR user than a normal rifle user. As far as the talent goes, Perfectly in Sync is one of the best weapon talents in the game for skill builds because not only does it give you weapon damage, but it also gives you skill damage. So if you can use some sort of synergized skill build slash weapon damage build and put this weapon in there, you could gain another 40% skill damage and 40% weapon damage. And that's why with this weapon, only a few bullets giving you all of those buffs is one of the top tier talents to use in the game. But this one, again, is specifically used for skill builds. Now, other honorable mentions that we'll use here are very niche, okay? These are going to be very niche used talents. For example, Sledgehammer or Perfect Sledgehammer, like you can see here on the lefty. This is a support talent that is very strong. Now, I personally will only use this for like raids or maybe incursions, something with really heavy bosses that you really need to burn down as quickly as possible. So typically, like maybe the healer or like some sort of support style build would be rocking this sort of talent because you're going to have to throw grenades to proc this talent. So you're not really focused on the DPS aspect of it. You're more focused on supporting your team and using something like Perfect Sledgehammer. As soon as you deal damage with any type of grenade, that target will take 40% more damage to armor and 30% less movement speed, which is really, really strong for those boss encounters, specifically for the raid or incursions. Now, or legendaries if you're nasty. Another honorable mention, Rock and Roll Shotgun, Perfectly Extra. The reason why I am mentioning this specific shotgun is because that 50% extra magazine size makes this shotgun a monster for gaining stacks, whether it be for Striker or Heartbreaker or even Obliterate. This weapon is A1 top tier to use to get those stacks. Because if I show you, let's see, the normal ACS 12 right here, this one is a 20 round magazine. So you're getting an extra 10, that's crazy. So you get that 30 round mag, and by the time you're at the bottom of that 30 round mag, you will have your 200 stacks of Striker. It's ridiculously strong. Now, I am not a big rifle or sniper right now in the game. However, these are really ridiculously strong talents. So right here, the M700 with Determined is easily one of the hardest hitting weapons in the game right now. That's not an exotic. The reason being is the Model 700 was significantly buffed with Project Resolve. And here recently, we were given the talent Determined. And this talent, a lot of people are saying is overpowered or broken or what have you. The developers have tried to tweak this talent a few different times. However, the way it sits right now is still ridiculously strong. So using this on a sniper is pretty much a no-brainer. You want Determined on your sniper because after killing an enemy with a headshot, that next shot, no matter where you land it, it's a guaranteed headshot. So using it with an M700 that is already one-tapping people, you're going to be able to one-tap named enemies using this talent. Now, if you're a huge sniper fan, please make sure you're using Determined. Now, for rifles, it's a little bit different. Now, I'm going to give you this one just because it's an easy example. This is the classic M1A. This is easily one of the most popular rifles in the game, and it has been since the game started. Now, what makes it so special is that it has a very high base damage and a really nice RPM. Now, what makes this rifle even crazier is that it also comes with a long underbarrel rail, and I've already told you that if it has the long underbarrel rail, you can put that link to laser pointer on there and then put flatline to get that amplified damage, and that's exactly what I have on this weapon. That way you can get that amplified damage. You could even put this behind a Crusader shield or a Striker shield, and you're good to go. You know, maybe 2-tap all of your enemies. Very nice. But all right, let's see. Other weapon talents to just point out here. Here we go. The classic M1A, or the classic M870, my bad. So the classic M870 with Optimus. This is a big player in PvP or PvE. You have this in your secondary, okay? Now the reason being is that Optimus, again, the least amount of ammo in your magazine, the more damage, right? So if I'm shooting rounds, it's going to hit harder and harder and harder and harder until I'm out of rounds in my magazine. Now, the cool thing about shotguns and what a lot of people do that a lot of people think is either cheating or hacking or whatever, what they do is they have their secondary weapon as a shotgun, this specific shotgun. And what they do is they have damage to armor, damage targets out of cover on here, just like I'm showing you. And then they have Optimist, right? Now you can see this shotgun with, let's see, I'm at 1.4 million armor on this build. And I have 1.3 million damage on this shotgun. That is without Optimist even being procced. You see what I'm saying? So what you could do is you can put this M870 as your secondary weapon. Shoot out 4 out of those 5 shots of your shotgun, and this will be a one hit no matter what. Because you're going to have that Optimist already fully procced at the most you can get it. And then when you're running up, boom, it's a one-hitter. But what I typically like to do is keep 2 rounds in there. So you can see this shotgun has a 5-round magazine. What I'll do is I'll shoot out 3 of those 5 rounds and then just keep it in my secondary. And then whenever someone wants to, try to get spicy, I can whip it out and, here's my boomstick. Boom, exactly. Game over. And then the last one I want to talk about that's not an exotic is the Dark Winter. The Dark Winter is one of the best burst damage weapons in the game because it has Perfect Killer. So Perfect Killer, as long as you kill an enemy with a crit hit, you gain 50% crit hit damage for 10 seconds. So that's kind of like Strained, but it's automatic and it's for 10 seconds. This isn't a until you're done firing or anything like that. This is just a blanket, hit them, kill them with a crit. You get that 10 seconds of 50 crit hit damage. And on a Vector, that is ridiculous. Another cool thing is on this Vector 45 ACP variant, you can run the Firewall specialization and get that plus 10% crit hit damage mod on there and hit even harder. Now, that is all of the non-exotics, okay? Now let's talk about some exotic weapon talents that you should really consider using right now in the Division 2, okay? So we've talked about normal weapons, all sorts of different types of builds for those weapon talents. Now let's talk about the amazing exotic weapons you can use in the game right now. Starting with the St. Elmo's engine. Now the St. Elmo's engine is easily one of the best assault rifles in the game. The reason being is not only can you have damage to targets out of cover on this weapon, and it has a high RPM of 850 rounds per minute, but the magazine size. The magazine size, in my opinion, is the biggest player for this weapon because if it had a normal magazine size, it would not be as lethal as it is. But this weapon has a 70 round magazine. So that means whenever you proc Actum S, the talent, you get 70 rounds of shock ammo. However, in PvP, that has dropped down to 50% of your magazine, so you would then only get 35 rounds of shock ammo for PvP. But in PvE, this is a ridiculously strong weapon, and it can do damage at range because it is an assault rifle. It can do the shock damage. It has the damage targets out of cover with the high RPM and the high magazine size. There's, not anything you could really nitpick with this weapon because it's that strong. Now, we'll come back to this weapon because there's a certain talent combination I'm going to show you with this weapon later on when we get to the gear talents. But moving on with the exotics, For a skill build, the capacitor is now one of the best weapons in the game, period. One of the best weapons in the game. Reason being is you now have damage to armor and damage to targets at a cover. This typically can only be done by shotguns or LMGs. So using this on an assault rifle is lethal. Not only that, but the talent Capacitance is one of the strongest talents in the game for skill builds. The reason being is while you are shooting an enemy with this weapon, you will build up stacks of skill damage. And if you use this on a skill build, you can see that it shows for each skill tier, you will gain 7.5% weapon damage. So unlike the test subject, right? So the test subject, this one with perfectly in sync, here it is. Perfectly in sync would give you 40% weapon damage and skill damage while you are shooting the enemy and hitting them with a skill at the same time. So this one has multiple stipulations and prerequisites that you have to meet in order for this talent to even work properly. However, with Capacitance and the capacitor, you get damage to armor, damage targets at a cover. You're shooting an enemy that gives you, let's see, so 40, 1.5. So what's that at? So we're at 50%? Yeah. No. So we're at 60. Yeah, 60%. So you get 60% weapon damage. Cap of 40, 1.5% each. That is insane. So you get 50 or 60. 60% skill damage, and with a skill tier 6, so you get another 45. That is ridiculous. So you get 45% weapon damage using this on a skill build, and you get well over the 40% skill damage that you would typically get on Perfectly in Sync on this weapon. And this weapon has damage to armor instead of health damage. So that makes this weapon leagues above the test subject now with Project Resolve and the change of these attributes. Where it used to be the test subject would be the main squeeze because it would only take a few bullets to proc all of those talents, where now this weapon is the cream of the crop. You get all of that weapon damage, you can get all of that skill damage, and you are good to go. Now, speaking of good damage, let's talk about the Lady Death, because the Lady Death is still one of the top tier weapons to use, and it's because of its talent, Breathe Free. So Breathe Free, while you are moving around, you gain stacks. However, if you are running around, you gain double the stacks. Now, these stacks will equal up to however big your magazine size is. Ayo, that's what she said. Now, the reason why they did that is because you can use this with True Patriot, you could use this with Brazos de Arquebus. You could use this with anything that'll give you that extra magazine size, and thus will give you more amplified damage. Because it says here on the Breathe Free talent that each round will consume a stack, and those stacks will give you 75% amplified damage. Now, not only that, but every kill you get, you have a 20% movement speed buff added to your character for 10 seconds. And it doesn't say here, but there's no cooldown on that, and it's not that you can stack it, but you can refresh it nonstop. So if there's 5 enemies in front of you and you keep killing every enemy back to back to back to back, it's just going to keep refreshing this movement speed buff. So you're going to keep that 20% movement speed the entire time because you're steadily getting those kills within the 10 seconds. Now, this weapon is perfect for speed running because you get those kills, you run faster, and you'll beat the clock faster. Very typical that speedrunners will use the Lady Death. Not only that, but for something like PvP, you could run a tank build with, like, say, Hunter's Fury or something like that and get all of that amplified damage to go with the Lady Death, and you could just run around and just burn people down with this bad boy. Now, another thing to note here, it's only for that magazine size, right? So once you spend all of those stacks, you're running around, you have max stacks, and then you use those max stacks, you have to run around again to get that amplified damage back. So just remember that if you're face tanking an enemy or a boss or what have you, as soon as you go through a magazine or two, you're going to have to run around to gain those stacks back up. That's why it gives you that movement speed buff. That way, after a kill, you could run around, get your stacks back up, and do it again. Now, another thing to note with the Lady Death is that it does have that melee damage associated with the under barrel slot. You can see with the little brass knuckles on there with the spikes. So this is really good for melee builds. Now, the Ouroboros does not have a good weapon talent, so I'm really not going to talk about that one. However, the Bullet King. The Bullet King is one of the fan favorites because you never have to reload. So the Bullet King gives you that talent Bullet Hell. The weapon never reloads, and for every 100 bullets that you hit on an enemy, it will replenish some of that ammo to you and your allies' reserves. So as long as you keep hitting your targets, you're going to keep getting ammo back. It's pretty sick. That one is pretty self-explanatory, where something like the Pestilence is not. So let's talk about the Pestilence as well, because this is yet another weapon talent that is huge in the community, but a lot of people are still confused by it because it was changed around quite a bit. So the Pestilence comes with a talent called Plague of the Outcasts. So hitting an enemy will apply a debuff that deals 100% weapon damage over 10 seconds. Now this can stack up to 50 times. Now note, that says weapon damage. It's not based off of crits. It's not based off of headshots. It's not even based off of status effects or anything. Nothing other than weapon damage. So you can increase your weapon damage by brand set bonuses. You can increase your weapon damage by running all red core attributes. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can increase your weapon damage. However, that is the only thing that affects this weapon. So just remember that. A lot of people still think that this is used with status effects, and it's not. This Plague of the Outcast talent is purely weapon damage based, but it is one of the most lethal talents in the game, especially if you can get those 50 stacks up, because every time this kills an enemy, 100% of those stacks are transferred to another enemy within 25 meters. So you could gain all of your stacks up on one elite, and then it'll transfer to, like, say, a veteran or like a red bar or something, and it'll just keep killing those enemies over and over because you already got the stacks up on a tankier enemy. So the trick is with this weapon is you focus fire the bigger enemy first, and then it'll trickle down and kill all of the smaller enemies. Really fun weapon to use. Now the Iron Lung is yet another great weapon to use because of the talent. Now this talent is called Ardent. So shooting an enemy will heat up a heat meter. Now this heat meter will fill up around half of your magazine. So if you're shooting at full rounds of 85, around 42 to 43 rounds, you will then have a heat meter filled. Now the heat meter, once it's full, all of the rest of your ammo are now ignited. So now you have burn bullets immediately. Now when you stop shooting, the meter will deplete over time, or when you reload the weapon, the meter will then fully deplete. So the trick is with this weapon is you face tank them, and that bottom half of your magazine will burn them guaranteed no matter what. And I'm telling you right now, that burn is lethal. So if you run this with, like, say, status effects or high weapon damage, you will seriously destroy whatever enemies in front of you. And in fact, I think my next build video is another Iron Lung build video where I'm just going ham on everything I touch. This weapon is severely, I don't want to say that. I was going to say overpowered. It's not overpowered. This is a very good weapon to use. However, just remember that you have to face tank or keep firing your weapon. So if you shoot your weapon and then stop, you might as well just reload, because you have to shoot out half of your magazine to get those burn bullets to even activate. So just remember that. It's a lot of face tanking and using up your entire magazine to get the most out of this talent. But it is a very good talent to use. And, well, I wanted to save the last For, well, I guess my favorite PvE exotic. And this is no surprise to anybody. The Scorpio is easily eh, one of the best exotics in the game. And for PvE, forget about it. This thing is cream. This it's I can't even. It's top tier. It's top shelf. It's above the top shelf. This is VIP access you have right here. I use this weapon for all of my legendary builds. So just to show you really quick, like something like this, my protection from elites, intimidate, or the support build with galvanize and vanguard. Either way, this is a very, very strong weapon to use in PvE for all content, all the way through legendary, raids, incursions, all of it. This is a very, very strong weapon to use. Now, you would not use this for like a DPS build. This is definitely for a support style build. You're not going to, use this with all reds and just try to, use your Scorpio like you would an AR. This is more of you want to get your stacks and you want everyone to benefit from you using this weapon. Now, again, with Project Resolve, you can change your exotics to have damage to targets out of cover for that bottom attribute. I highly recommend you do that for all of your exotics. Damage to targets out of cover is the best freaking attribute to use. I'm telling you right now. Don't sit there and compromise for something like crit chance or crit hit damage on your weapon. No, you want damage to targets out of cover. And as a, I guess, honorable mention, you could have damage to armor on there, but with a weapon like the Scorpio being a shotgun, it already gives you damage to armor. So the only real option you need is that damage to targets out of cover to get the most bang for your buck. But the talent, man, this talent is what separates the Scorpio from the rest of the pack. Now, this talent changes in PvE and PvP, so remember that. And the way to change that is you back out and you click options. So you can see in the bottom right of your screen all of these different options you can click. So right next to unmark, you can see it says options. So if I click options and I go to normalized stats, this is their quote unquote PvP modifier. So you click on and it'll change this to blue. You can see the blue tint in the background. And these talents change. So for right now, this is for PvP. It shows bleed, disrupt, and ensnare, right? Now, if I were to change that back to PvE, now it's poison, disrupt, or disorient, and shock. So there's no ensnare or anything there. Now, for PvE, doing that poison, disorient, and shock is amazing. That shock is probably the best thing for this weapon, because in legendary or any other sort of PvE content, when you're using this weapon, you're going to keep shooting them over and over, because this talent is called Septic Shock. Shooting an enemy will apply a stack of venom. However, shooting an enemy over and over will increase these stacks and add more debuffs. So the first time you shoot an enemy, you're poisoning them. Oh, it's messed up. You shoot them 3 times, it disorients them. They start, looking at the ground, wondering where they're going. That 6th shot will shock them. So that doesn't matter if you're going up against a rusher and legendary. As long as you keep shooting them 6 times, that will automatically shock them wherever they are, and then you can just reload and unload all of that onto that enemy. Now, the 7th shot is vital for your entire team, because that will give everyone and everything on your team 20% more damage towards that enemy. Now, using this with something like opportunistic on a backpack will make it even more lethal. But again, we'll talk about that once we start to talk about the gear talents that you need to use. Now, as far as PvP, right? So that was the PvE. Going back to the PvP part, looking at this talent, 2 shots will bleed your player. 4 shots will disrupt your player. And that 7th shot will ensnare the player. Now, a lot of people are probably like, what's ensnare? That is riot foam. So shooting this in PvP, being conflict or the dark zone, will actually cause the player to be foamed once you hit that ensnare. And then the 8th shot, again, all additional sources will get 20% additional damage. Pretty cool. And that is it for all of your weapon talents. Pretty snazzy, right? Not bad. Not bad at all. Now, if you have any questions about specific weapon talents and how, I would use them, just let me know in the comments and we can do more of a deep dive. But as far as these weapon talents go for high ends, strained, flatline, sadist if you're running a bleed build, optimist, perfect optimist, in sync, and then, something like perfect killer for like the dark winter. These are all the same talents. For snipers, definitely use determined. You want the rock and roll for your heartbreaker and striker builds, but everything else is pretty much the same. Flatline, just because you want that amplified damage. Now, as far as the gear talents, I want to start with the exotics, and then we're going to work our way back into the high ends. Because I do have this St. Elmo's here, and I did tell you that there is a combination I want to talk to you about. And it's this combination right here, the Shocker Punch with the St. Elmo's engine. Now, this came out a few seasons ago, and when it came out a few seasons ago, it was called the Double Shock Meta. All right? The Double Shock Meta. The reason why this is called the Double Shock Meta is because first, you're using the St. Elmo's engine. Now, using the St. Elmo's engine, you have the shock bullets from the talent Actum Est. However, this is the only exotic talent combo in the game, just so you know. This is the only time you can use an exotic weapon and an exotic gear item and get more bonuses. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, this is the Shocker Punch exotic holster, and it comes with this extremely long talent called Defibrillator. So Defibrillator has a few different stipulations here. So the first part, it says, while the Shocker Punch is equipped, the stun received by the agent, that shock status effect, is reduced by 50%. So just by putting this on, you have 50% shock resistance, which is amazing. It truly is, especially when you have hazard protection on here as well. So you're actually technically getting 60% just from rocking this holster. Now the next part, we're going to skip because that says you have to use a shield. We're not using a shield. And the following part says using St. Elmo's engine. Now this is the part I want to talk about because you have to use this with that assault rifle to get this part to be activated. So it says using the St. Elmo's engine with this holster will give you an additional 100% melee damage, and the next melee attack you do will shock the target. And that's why this is called the Double Shock Meta, because you can run around with that holster and this weapon and just melee somebody and it will immediately shock them. Not only that, but if you're shooting this weapon and you get that Actum Est to activate, you will then also be able to shock them, thus, giving you the term double shock. So that was the first one I wanted to talk about. Now let's talk about other exotic talents on your gear items that are the best things to use right now in the game. So, talking about exotic holsters, there's only 3 we're going to talk about. Now, the next one is the Dodge City. Now, the reason why we're going to talk about the Dodge City is because if you match this up with, I know I have it here. Where is it? Right here. Boom. We're going to start getting a little deep into these talents, people. So I hope you have your notepads out and I hope you have your popcorn ready because now we're going to do some deep dives. So the Dodge City holster is probably one of the most lethal holsters in the game with one of the craziest stipulations. All right. So it's called Quick Draw. When your pistol is holstered, you will gain stacks up to 100. When you swap to that pistol, your first shot will consume the buff and deal 10% damage per stack. That is 1,000% damage. 1,000. Not 100, 1,000. So when you have that combination, you could use something like Perfect Headhunter with, those headshots, what have you. but then you would be able to use it with like the D50 or the Regulus or the Liberty, something like that, right? But it's all about that holster, because whenever you're watching people that do one-shot builds with the Raid, or one-shot builds with the Incursion, or one-shot builds with, I mean, anything really, they're probably using the Dodge City holster and some sort of pistol in their, inventory, because they're running around, they're shooting people with their normal weapon, and then whenever things get hairy, they'll switch out their pistol, and that very first shot, bam, 1,000%. It's amazing. And then finally, for the holsters, we have the waveform. All right. Now, the waveform is for those skill builds. The reason why I'm saying this is a really good talent to use right now is because this gives you 30% skill damage to each of your skills. So if you are using a turret drone build, think of this like an hourglass. It'll go from one side to the other and then back. So you'll get 30% weapon damage for your turret, and then it'll go and trickle down to your drone, and then you'll have 30% weapon or skill damage on your drone, and then it'll trickle down and do it again. So what it says here is it's called alternating current. So it generates a stack of 3% skill damage on one of your skills for every second. Now that'll cap out at 10 seconds. So, or 10 stacks. So 10 stacks, 3% each stack, you get 30% skill damage. Now after 10 seconds, it will then transfer over to your other skill, and then it'll go back and forth, back and forth. So this gives you up to 30% skill damage for each of your skills, making this one of the best exotics to use for any sort of skill build. And those are your exotic holsters, all right? Now let's talk about chest pieces. I'm only going to talk about these two because they're the only two that really mean anything. So the first one is the tardigrade, okay? This is perfect for your tank support builds. It is amazing. This will really help out, and yes, this does stack with Unbreakable. Now let me explain. So the talent is called Ablative Nano Plating. Whenever you or your allies' armor breaks, they will gain 80% of your armor as bonus armor. Okay? Bonus armor. So remember, Unbreakable, whenever your armor is fully depleted, you get your armor back. This, instead of giving your armor back, it will give you bonus armor. So you could use this while your teammates are all using Unbreakable, and when their armor breaks, they get Unbreakable and they get your tardigrade bonus armor. And that's been a trick that people have been using for years. This is a great supportive exotic, and I highly recommend it for teams. It's really strong to increase your survivability tenfold, and it will really help you in those sticky situations. Now, the other chess piece is the Ridgeway's Pride. This is one of my favorite chess pieces because it not only bleeds the enemy, but it will heal you. I use this whenever I talk about vampire builds because this is truly a vampire exotic. Now, the Ridgeway's Pride chess piece comes with the talent Bleeding Edge. Now, this does two different things. The first thing is shooting an enemy within 15 meters will immediately apply a bleed. That is the bleeding part of the vampire, right? Well, another thing that the vampire does while it's sucking your blood is it repairs itself, right? He gets stronger. And with that being said, here's the next part. It says it will repair between 3 and 48% of your armor per second for every enemy that is bleeding within 15 meters. That is per second. So you're able to heal yourself by ungodly amounts of armor, depending on how many people you get on a bleed, while you're damaging them with your bleed. Thus, vampire. And that is it for the exotic chess pieces. Now let's talk about the exotic masks. There's only 3, and they're all 3 completely different masks. The first one, let me switch over. There we go. So the first one is going to be the Catharsis. This is one of the fan favorite masks, and rightfully so. This is a great mask not only for survivability, but also to counter skill builds and this gives you weapon damage. So it's a great synergized type of exotic. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the talent is called Vicious Cycle. So taking damage with this build will gain you stacks. Each of those stacks will give you weapon damage. So taking damage gives you weapon damage, which is nice. However, if you take damage at max stacks, that will trigger a purge. Now, this purge will remove all the stacks, but it will also remove all status effects that are on you, and it will drop a healing cloud, which will restore 5% of your max armor for 10 seconds to all allies in the cloud. So technically, if you were to have a whole bunch of people run the catharsis and all of them sit next to each other, as they are all getting hit with damage, they could all drop clouds and then you could all heal each other within those clouds while gaining weapon damage. And whenever you're healing each other with those clouds, it will also take away all status effects. So say you're in PvP or even in a boss encounter for PvE, and say you get shocked or disoriented or burned or what have you, if you're at max stacks and you get hit with any of those statuses and it purges your stacks, you will immediately be rid of all of those statuses. And it's amazing. It really does help out, especially in PvP, because everyone and their mom likes to run a burned sticky or chem launcher. Let's be real. Now, a nice little trick, little insider trick here. Incoming repairs does work with this mask. You can see there is incoming repairs on the mask as an attribute. What I would highly recommend you do is put a incoming repairs mod on the mask as well. You will see a significant change in that healing. The next exotic mask is the Coyote's mask. This is the best damage mask in the game. This will stack. Again, this will stack. So if you have 3 different players on your team all running this exotic and you are shooting enemies at different distances, you can have this buff go to all allies. For example, if you're running something like the raid, okay, you could have 3 people running the Coyote's mask, and you can get all 3 of these procs to activate at the exact same time. Just remember that those 3 individuals have to be shooting enemies at different distances to make that happen. So the talent is called Pack Instincts. You and all of your allies will gain different bonuses based off of the distances you shoot your enemy. So between 0 and 15 meters, if I'm shooting an enemy, everybody gets 25% crit hit damage. If my teammate is then between 15 and 25 meters, everyone will then get crit chance and crit hit damage. And then finally, if someone's being like a sniper or something crazy, they could hit someone at 25 meters plus, and then everyone gets crit chance. So with everything said and done with this exotic, you can get 35% crit chance and 35% crit hit damage. This is one of the best exotics to use in a team for damage, I promise you. Just remember that if you're doing that and if you are getting all 3 of those procs, that's 35% crit chance that you get. Remember that the max is only 60. So if you're running around with, say, 35, 30-ish percent crit chance and all the rest into crit hit damage, and you're rocking a team that can do all 3 of these procs, everyone will still have max crit chance, but then have way more crit hit damage. It's all just based off of how you put these exotics and all of these different talents to use. And finally, for our exotic mask, we have the Vial. Now, the Vial mask is, it's really one of the most annoying masks in the game. I'm going to be real. This thing is ridiculously strong. I love it. I love status effects builds, and this mask is perfect for status effects. Now, let me explain. The talent is called Toxic Delivery. So Toxic Delivery will only work if you apply a status effect to your target. Doesn't mean if it's blind, bleed, disorient, disrupt, ensnare, whatever it is. It does not matter. As long as it's a status effect, it will proc this talent. Now, what makes this talent so special is that doing any sort of status effects towards an enemy will apply a damage over time debuff. Now, this is a 10-second debuff, and the damage is equal to 50% of your concussion grenade. And that's just starting off, right? So just to give you a little sense of that, my concussion grenade is at 1.4 million damage. So that means that every time I were to apply a status effect to any enemy, that mask will deal 700,000 damage over 10 seconds, because that's half of my concussion damage. Now, not only that, but like I said, that's just the start of it, because the rest of the talent says it is increased by the amount of status effects you have on the build. So if you're running this with a full status effects build, you can get that to hit well over 1 million damage just by using a status effect. It's a lot. It truly is, especially in PvP. If you're running a status build with Vile, you're going to be taking out those enemies ridiculously fast. This is a very, very good mask to use. And as a little secret, you can use it with the Jammer Pulse and hurt enemies. So just by running around with this and like a Jammer Pulse will help you do more damage. Now, that is it for the exotics on this part of the screen. Let's go to the other side. So starting with, we'll go to the gloves and then we'll finish up with the backpacks. So BTSU gloves. Now the BTSU gloves are perfect for skill builds. Skill builds rejoice with the BTSU gloves. However, there are a few stipulations that have to be met with this pair of gloves. And that stipulation is you have to have a hive as one of your skills. Now let me explain. The talent is called a transference overclock. So what you're going to do is you are going to overcharge yourself and your team. How are you going to do that? Well, it's going to be with your hive. So it says here that detonating a hive will refresh all of your skill cooldowns, but then it will also grant an overcharge for 15 seconds. Now, if you are at skill tier 6, this effect will also apply to all allies. So if you are rocking around with a, let's just say a healer build, I'll show you this one right here. So say I'm rocking around with a healer build and I have my healer hive. Well, I can put my healer hive on the ground, and once I detonate it, I can overcharge everyone on my team. Now, this can only happen every 2 minutes, so you have to use this wisely, because if not, you're going to have to wait 2 minutes to do it again. But this is a perfect pair of gloves. The only problem is, again, you do have to run a hive. Now, finally, let's talk about the exotic backpacks, and then we'll get into the remainder gear talents. So the two exotics we're going to talk about, the Memento and the Ninja Bike. Both of these are amazing exotics for pretty opposing reasons. The first one, the Memento. Now this is the best exotic in the game. In the game. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This is the best exotic in the game. This gives you weapon damage, skill efficiency, and armor regen on top of more weapon damage, bonus armor, and more skill efficiency. You can really, really make some lethal builds using this exotic. Now, the best way to get this exotic, just farm targeted loot backpacks for, I would probably say countdown on challenging or heroic. Just me personally, that's how I would say get it. Now, this has two different talents in one. One is a short-term talent buff, and the other one is a long-term talent buff. So the short-term talent buff is based off of your core attributes. So just using it with the build I'm showing you right now, right? This is just a skill build, whatever, all random pieces. So every time I were to get a kill with this build specifically, I have 1 red, 1 blue, and 6 yellows. That would give me 5% weapon damage, 10% bonus armor, and 30% skill efficiency. Now remember, skill efficiency is easily the best attribute for skill builds. The best. It doesn't matter what skill build, all skill builds. Skill efficiency is the best attribute to have because it gives you everything. It is a umbrella attribute, if you will, because it gives you everything under that umbrella, being skill haste, skill repair, skill damage, all of those things, skill health. Those things are affected by skill efficiency. Now remember, I said that's just the short-term buff because the long-term buff will give you more skill efficiency. So the long-term buff stacks up to 30 times. Now that would give you 30% weapon damage, 30% skill efficiency, and 3% armor regen. Now, as long as you get 1 kill per 5 minutes and pick up that trophy, you can keep all of those buffs active the entire time. Pretty cool. So again, you get weapon damage, bonus armor, and skill efficiency just from the short term, but then you also get long-term buffs. And if you already have the long-term buffs, all of those additional trophies you get just keep refreshing the short-term buffs. So you can get both of those buffs to be active at the same time. This is easily the best exotic in the game. The only caveat, you do have to get kills and pick up those trophies. So it's more aimed at, solo players or players that are more likely to get those kills to pick up those trophies. Now, another thing is that this gives you all 3 core attributes. So you get a weapon damage, an armor, and a skill tier just by using this exotic. So it makes it universal in a sense because you could use this for skill builds, you could use this for damage builds, you could use this for tank builds, or hell, you could use it for all of the above. And that what makes this exotic so sought after is because you can literally just use it with anything and it'll make it better. That weapon damage will make you hit harder for damage builds. That bonus armor and armor regen will make you more survivability and more sustainable for tank builds. And that skill efficiency will make your skills more deadly, whether it be a healer build or a skill damage build. Again, the memento is the best thing in the game. It truly is. And finally, the ninja bike. This is the last exotic we're going to talk about before we just talk about the high-end talents. So the ninja bike, similar to the memento, but also vastly different. So how is it similar? Well, it gives you 3 core attributes. So it makes it universal. You can use this for a damage, a tank, or a skill build. So you can use it for whatever. However, the talent is completely different. This one is called resourceful. So it slots in with any brand set or gear set to fulfill a requirement towards that brand set or gear set bonus. So you can use it with whatever bonuses you want. Let's say we want Hunter's Fury with an Eclipse, with with a Striker, with Emperor's Guard, and with Contractors, right? So because all of these are different, with the Ninja Bike, as soon as I put that sucker on, it makes it to where I have 2 of each of these, right? So now if I go to the Hunter's Fury, I have the 2-piece bonus. If I go to the Eclipse, I have the 2-piece bonus. If I go to the Strikers, I have the 2-piece bonus. Same with Emperor's Guard. Now I have skill duration and repair skills. And for the Contractors, that gives me LMG damage and weapon handling. You can use this for anything, any brand set or gear set in the game. You can see right there, boom, total armor and health. If I put Empress, now I get skill health and skill damage. And that's because of the Ninja Bike. However, a lot of people understand that because this is a backpack, you lose your backpack talent, which kind of makes this a double-edged sword, right? This is only viable for a handful of builds at most, and I've already covered them on my channel. It's more towards like a full max damage to armor build, or maybe like a damage to health build, something so crazy and unique that you can only put it together with a Ninja Bike. Does that make it the best or the hardest hitting or anything like that? Probably not, but this definitely, like, the build diversity balloons with this exotic because now you can use all of these different combinations together because of this resourceful talent. So it makes it fun for build making, but as far as those meta builds and those meta talents, it cannot hold up a candle to them because those talents are so lethal. Now, with that, I'm going to segue into those talents and we're going to get rid of all of these exotics. So, with that, let's kind of roll into our backpack talents and then we'll finish up with our chest talents and get out of here. All right? Now, again, all of the timestamps and everything will be added at the end of the live premiere. I know that this is a very long video and a lot of information is being thrown your way. Again, it's like information via fire hose. I completely understand it's a lot, but I'm trying to get you on the same page that I am. That way you understand all of these talents are being used for a reason because they're usually the best ones to use. Now, with that being said, let's talk about backpack talents. The first one I want to talk about is Wicked. Wicked is an amazing talent to use with status effects builds. Now, you can use this talent with the Ridgeway's Pride chess piece, remember? Because I just showed you that this exotic, while shooting an enemy with 15 meters, will apply a bleed. So using that with Wicked would give you 18% weapon damage for 20 seconds. Now, that is the part that is really strong. 20-second duration. Now, I don't know about you, but whenever I'm in any sort of encounter in PvP or PvE, 20 seconds is a lifetime. Let's be real. Have you ever tried to sit behind a car for 20 seconds while someone's trying to shoot you? Yeah, right. They're just going to run around the car and kill you, man. The 20 seconds is ridiculous. You could have this procced at like a landmark and run halfway down the alley and start shooting other people with this proc completely active. It's really good, really strong. You can use this with trauma or perfect trauma. You can use this with the Ridgeway's Pride. You could use this with the Scorpio. You can use this with a jammer pulse. You can use this with the Vile Mask. There are so many ways you can use this talent, and that duration is what makes this talent so special because you can get that weapon damage to be active for the entire time you're fighting. Not only that, but there's no cooldown on here, so you can keep proccing it over and over. Next up, we're going to talk about Creeping Death. Now, Creeping Death is one of my favorite talents to use for speedruns. Here's my speedrun build, okay? Eclipse, all status with Vile and Creeping Death with that capacitor. Remember, the capacitor is A1 top tier for skill builds right now. You can see right there I'm at 117k base damage. Again, that's because of that capacitance talent. Whereas if I were to use that test subject, where's that sucker at? It drops down to 86. That's a 30k difference. That's why we're using the capacitor. But we are also using Creeping Death because whenever you apply a status effect, it is then applied to all enemies within 8 meters. This is one of the best backpack talents to use for speedruns. A lot of people would just say, use this or use that. No, you want Creeping Death, I promise you. There are so many leaderboards and league events and all of that where I'm top 3, top 5, whatever in the leaderboards. And it's because I am using this backpack talent. I'm telling you. Because whenever you walk into a room, you'll see those ads are all, the NPCs are all huddled up together. So if you can hit one of them with a status, it will then apply to all of those enemies. So if I'm using this with like, say, a burn sticky bomb, I could shoot that one burn sticky bomb and instead of just killing the one enemy and waiting for like my eclipse to go off, I could shoot that one enemy and then all of them will die because of the Creeping Death. This is a very strong backpack talent to use. Please give it a go. Next up, we're going to talk about the Perfect Combined Arms because I was talking about using that with the test subject, okay? So the test subject, remember, perfectly in sync. Shooting an enemy will give you skill damage. Hitting them with your skill will give you weapon damage. And if you do both, you get skill damage and weapon damage, right? Well, using this, you can only, you could shoot 2 bullets and get it to activate. Well, if you do that, you could also activate perfect combined arms. Because look at this sucker. This says shooting an enemy will increase your total skill damage by 30% for 3 seconds. Now, again, there's no cooldown on here, so you can keep shooting an enemy and keep proccing it over and over and over and over and over and over and over. But that's not the point. The point is that you could use that with perfectly combined arms, get 40% from the weapon, and then get another 30% from the backpack. So just from shooting your enemy, you get 70% weapon or skill damage with 40% weapon damage. It's ridiculously strong. A lot of people aren't using it because it's Hana U, and the Hana U brand set bonuses give you skill haste, skill damage, and weapon damage. But if you use them in the right order, it'll be very lethal. Now, moving on, another great backpack talent to use is Adrenaline Rush. This is still one of the best backpack talents to use in the game to increase your survivability and sustainability when in encounters. Now, why is this so sought after? Well, it gives you bonus armor, but it keeps giving, it'll just stack and stack and stack. So, for example, it says here, whenever you're within 10 meters of an enemy, you will gain 20% bonus armor for 5 seconds. That will stack up to 3 times. So that's 60% bonus armor from 3 enemies. Now, the cooldown is 5 seconds, but if you are still within the 10 meters of an enemy, it will just keep proccing over and over. So you will never lose it, technically, because you're next to an enemy. And it makes it really good, especially if you're like trying to face tank or something, and then that bonus armor is gone, and then right as they're reloading, you get that bonus armor back, and then you shoot them and kill them. It's a really good one. I really do like Adrenaline Rush, especially with like a chess piece talent like Intimidate, which I think I could show you again. My build right here, boom. I use this build where I have Intimidate with Adrenaline Rush because they both work off of each other. Now here's the perfect variant. It's called Perfect Adrenaline Rush, and you can find it on the Matador. That's the named Walker Harris backpack. And this one actually gives you 69% bonus armor instead of that normal 60%. But again, super helpful. It's really good for running gun, and it will keep giving you that bonus armor as long as you're next to enemies. Super, super helpful. Next up, we're going to talk about Vigilance. Vigilance is the number 1 backpack talent to use for damage. This is my Old Faithful. Old Faithful is what I call it. And this is the DPS build I have been using for 4 years. I have been using this build right here, for 4 years. And it's still the best build to use for damage. Still. The only thing I do is I change out my primary weapon. Right now, I'm rocking it with the Shield Splinter. I think a couple seasons ago, I was rocking it with the St. Elmo's, and a couple seasons before that, I was rocking it with the Eagle Bear. But still, this build is still the best in the game. Just try it out. I promise you. Try it out. Give it a go. And the reason being is this backpack talent, man, is so lethal. It's called Vigilance. So it increases your weapon damage by 25% just by putting it on. You don't have to do anything to get this weapon damage. Just put it on, and you get another 25% weapon damage. However, if you take damage, it will disable for 4 seconds. That is the only caveat. As soon as you take damage, it's gone, which is fine because you wait 4 seconds, you have it back, go back into it. But while you're running around and the enemy doesn't know what you're doing, you are hitting them for some insane numbers. Truly the best thing to use for DPS builds or tank DPS builds. Either way, Vigilance is the way to go. Now, as far as honorable mentions for backpack talents, Perfect Galvanize is okay, but it's really good for legendaries. Reason being is because your support builds will really help out people in legendaries. You have to have a support build in legendary. That way you can get through the content fast and easy. It is very efficient and very effective. All you have to do is apply a blind and snare, confuse, or shock, and you give 50% of your armor as bonus armor. And you can keep doing that every 10 seconds. Not only that, but using this backpack talent with the Scorpio is a no-brainer, because just by using the Scorpio, you will keep this talent alive. Now, to give you an example, here is the build. Boom. Now, this build, with the right combination, you can give your teammates 1.8 million armor as bonus armor just by using this build. And that is a game changer. Now, other notable, right here. Here's another good one. The strategic alignment is the named China Light backpack, and it comes with perfect shock and awe. Now, normal shock and awe will do the same thing, just for less duration. Now, perfect shock and awe, applying a status effect, will increase your skill damage by 20% for 27 seconds, which is insane. Again, those durations are what makes the talent so special. Now, 27 seconds in any sort of encounter is a lifetime. I was telling you how 20 seconds for Wicked was forever. This 27 seconds is even better. For real. It's even better. So using this with, like, say, a Stinger Hive, you throw out a Stinger Hive, it makes them bleed, you get that skill damage, and then you have, like, say, like a Sticky Bomb or maybe like a Mortar Turret, something like that. You'll get that extra skill damage from Perfect Shock and Awe. Boom, one hit them. It's super effective, for sure. And finally, for the backpack talents, I want to talk about Perfectly Opportunistic or Opportunistic, whichever one you want to use. Now, normal Opportunistic will only give you 10%, where Perfectly Opportunistic will give you 15%. So it says right here, shooting an enemy will, or enemies you hit will take 15% more damage from all sources. Now, this is only able through a marksman rifle or shotgun. Now, the shotgun part is where I want to double down on, because I'm not a big marksman rifle person. I don't like snipers. Not in this game. They're not as good as they were in Division 1. I tell you that. However, shotguns, whoo! Shotguns will jack up your day, for sure. Now, I use this for my incursion healer build. So if I go back up to here, this build right here, this is my incursion healer build, and I'll use it with the lefty to proc that perfect sledgehammer, like I was saying, for those bosses. Or I'll have the Scorpio to proc the perfectly opportunistic. And then that makes it immediate. You'll see that icon over the enemy's head, and then everyone that's shooting that enemy gets that extra damage. And that is a perfect support talent to use to help out all your DPS players do more damage. Because remember, it's all about team synergy. It's all about having those support people where they need to be with the right talents, because those support people will make those damage people godly. All right, and that is it for the backpack talents. Now let's finish up with the chess piece talents, and then we're out of here, okay? I know it's a long one, trust me, but I get these questions asked all the time, so I'm just going to show you all the talents you can use right now that are viable, and then all those other talents can go out the window, okay? Now let's talk about chess piece talents. First up, we're going to talk about glass cannon or perfect glass cannon, okay? This is one of my favorite talents to use, and here's the normal and perfect variant next to each other so you can see. Now, I use glass cannon for damage builds. I use glass cannon for skill builds. I'll use glass cannon in PvP. I'll use glass cannon in PvE. I'll use it when it's night out. I'll use it when it's daytime. I'll use it here. I'll use it there. I'll use it everywhere. And the reason being is perfect glass cannon or glass cannon will amplify all the damage you deal. All of it. Whether it be grenade damage, skill damage, weapon damage, all of it, all the damage. However, and a lot of people don't like this talent because of the however part. However, you do take more damage. And the damage you take is amplified, and it does hurt. So normal glass cannon, you're taking an additional 50% amplified. It's a lot. Trust me, I know. But perfect glass cannon, that's 60% amplified. So in my defense, if you're going to use glass cannon, you might as well use perfect. Just hit them harder. Who cares, right? Who cares? Depending on the build. I mean, if you want to go skill build, definitely Empress. That way you can get that skill efficiency, because skill efficiency is bae. But all right. So that's the whole glass cannon part. I love it for the extra damage, but I know a lot of people hate it for the extra incoming damage. Now moving on to talents that people really do like though. For skill builds, we have kinetic momentum. This is the number one substitute if you are not using glass cannon. Glass cannon will hit harder out of the gate, but kinetic momentum with all the stacks active will hit right at the same, if not maybe harder. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's check out this talent. It's called kinetic momentum. When in combat, each skill will generate a stack, so both of your skills, while it is active or not on cooldown. Now, those stacks will increase your skill damage by 1%, and it'll stack up to 15. So that will immediately give both of your skills up to 15% skill damage. Now, you could use this with waveform and get the 30% from that exotic to go with the 15% here from kinetic momentum. It'll work out very good together. But again, this is a great substitute to use if you don't want to use glass cannon. Next up, Unbreakable. This is easily one of the fan favorite talents because it saves your ass. Let's be real. It does. If you're in a sticky situation and all of a sudden a new enemy spawn is right on top of you and they all start shooting you at once and you lose all of your armor, this talent will save you. Because it says whenever your armor is depleted, it will repair 95% of that armor. And that'll happen every 60 seconds. So if you're running 1 million armor, this will make you run 1.95 million armor. If you're rocking, it really just expands your survivability. However, I will note that it's only every minute. So if you're in a really sticky situation and your Unbreakable procs immediately, you might want to go find a cover and get ready, because if they go through your armor again, you're dead, right? So it is a good talent to use as a fallback, but it's not the best talent to use if you're getting swarmed by enemies, because they're just going to go through your armor again regardless. This can only help you by so much. But a lot of people do like to use this in PvP. That way they can face tank, do whatever they need to, and, get that dub. Now, next up, let's talk about Spotter, or Perfect Spotter. So let's do that, and then we'll compare. There we go. Boom. So Perfect Spotter is on the chess piece called Closer, but you can get normal Spotter on all chess pieces. So normal Spotter amplifies your weapon and skill damage by 15% to all pulsed enemies, but Perfect Spotter will give you 20. Now again, that is weapon damage and skill damage. Now you can use that with Flatline, right? So if I put Flatline on this Carbine 7, that's 15% amplified pulse damage. That's the same on Spotter. So that means then, as long as I have that linked laser pointer, because remember, that linked laser pointer is an attachment that you can get from the Technician specialization. So using this linked laser pointer and just aiming my weapon, I will then get 15% amplified damage from the Flatline talent, but then I would also get 15% amplified from the Spotter talent. And that's why using Spotter and Flatline together with the Technician specialization is key for all of those pulse builds, because it gives you all of that amplified damage. Really, really strong. Now, Chain Killer. I was trying to talk about this earlier, but it wasn't really relevant. But now it is. So let's talk about it. So the Chain Killer comes with the talent called Perfect Headhunter. Now, Perfect Headhunter is for all of you headshot build people out there. This thing is amazing. Now, not only that, but you can pair this up with Determined. Remember that sniper that I showed you earlier? The Model 700. Where is that sucker? Here it is at the bottom. Okay, so using determined with perfect headhunter. So perfect headhunter, after killing an enemy with a headshot, right? That's just like determined. After killing enemy with a headshot, right? They both start out the exact same way. So right off the bat, you know you can use them together. Now the chess piece says that after killing an enemy with a headshot, your next hit with that weapon within 30 seconds will deal an additional 150% of that killing blow. 150%. So that means if, let's just throw out some crazy number. If you hit someone for 10 million on a headshot, right? And you killed them, 10 million. That means your next hit would immediately be 15 million. Stupid. That is so good. However, read the rest of this talent. It says that your damage is capped to 800%, but it can be raised up to 1250% if your headshot is higher than 150. So just with this build right here, just random, let me look. My headshot is at 191. So that applies. That means that perfect headhunter on the chain killer, that means I can get up to 1250% of my weapon damage. Crazy. Now that goes with determined. So remember that after killing an enemy with a headshot, your next shot is automatically a headshot no matter where you hit them. So you can use this and proc the headhunter. That procs this. That procs the headhunter. That procs this. You see what I'm getting at here? It's a perfect combination. So remember that. It's really good, really strong. Next up, this is one of the strongest talents to use right now in the game, and it is called Perfectly Efficient. Now remember, we have instant heals now in the game. Instant heals. What does that mean? How do you do an instant heal, Kami? Well, it's pretty simple. You know your armor kit button? Just double tap your armor kit button. That will be an instant heal. Now the instant heal is not a full armor kit. So if you double tap the armor kit, you only get 25% of your armor. However, if you hold down the armor kit button, you'll get a full 100% of your armor. So remember that. Now the reason why I'm telling you that about the instant heals is because this talent, Perfectly Efficient, makes those instant heals damn near unlimited. Damn near. It's really close. It's almost unlimited, but it's not. I think you typically get what, 4 armor kits? I remember testing this. I was able to use 11 armor kits in a row before losing all of my armor kits. So let me explain here. So it says that using an armor kit has a 75% chance to not consume it. Now that means that if you hit an instant heal, that gives you a 75% chance of it not consuming your armor kit, which then gives you an opportunity to use the instant heal again and again and again. This thing is ridiculously strong. And that's ever since Project Resolve. So that's just from this year. That's how strong this talent is. Now, people are using this in PvP a lot, especially in the Dark Zone. However, just remember that it's only a 75% chance. I say that because it's not guaranteed. Meaning, if you were to use something like Unbreakable, Unbreakable is guaranteed. Unbreakable will give you back your armor, guaranteed. This does not give you back your armor kit, guaranteed. So you could be in a PvP fight, have 4 armor kits, use this, and still go away with 4 armor kits. However, there is that chance that you could have that special, encounter where you have 11 armor kits. And then all of a sudden you're unkillable because you can keep healing yourself over and over and over and over and over. Really cool. Really strong. Highly recommend. Or at least try it out. I mean, you don't have to use it. And let's see. There are 3 more to talk about. 4. Okay. Next up, we have Perfect Companion. Perfect Companion is a chest piece exclusive, meaning normal Companion is on a backpack. So this is one of the only talents that you can double dip. Now, what do I mean by double dip? Let me show you really quick what double dipping looks like, because I purposely left it out of the backpack so I could show you the chest piece. But now I'm realizing that I wanted it. That way I could show you what double dipping looks like. Now I know I have one. I actually do not. Holy guacamole Batman. I do not have that backpack talent. So let me show you what it looks like here. And I'll go ahead and re-roll this. I don't care. For the sake of the video. Who cares? All right. So there we go. This is what double companion looks like. Because you have companion on the backpack and you have perfect companion on the chest piece. Yes, they do work together. Yes, for months we had a double companion meta because everyone and their mom put this together. And the God rolled perfect chess piece is this one right here. Double crit and then change that core attribute. And then that way you can use this on whatever build you want. So perfect companion, while you are within 10 meters of an ally or skill, you get a total weapon damage increase by 20%. However, on the backpack, you get 15%. So you can get 35% from both of them together at the same time. Just remember, though, the backpack companion is only 5 meters, where the chest piece companion is 10 meters. And that's why, in my opinion, the perfect companion is better, because then you could use that with, like, say, vigilance, something like that, and then get even more damage. Okay. Now, 2 more talents, and then we are out of here, okay? Next one, Point Man and Perfect Vanguard. This is a great support talent. I am showing you a lot of support talents out there. That way, if you want to go damage, I'm showing you the talents to use for damage. I'm showing you the talents to use for support. And I'm also showing you all the talents to use for skill builds. That way, at the end of this video, you know exactly what to use in whatever part of your build making process. Now, Perfect Vanguard goes hand in hand with that Perfect Galvanize. So if I show you that build again, it looks like this. And the reason being is that every time I popped my shield, I would get Perfect Vanguard. And every time I shot the enemy with my Scorpio, I would get Perfect Galvanize. And with this build, you get to give your teammates 1.8 million armor as bonus armor, because Perfect Galvanize gives 50% of your armor, and Perfect Vanguard also gives 50% of your armor. So using something like this would be one of the best support builds to use with your team. That way you give them 1.8 bonus armor, and you're giving them damage from the Coyote's mask, and you can throw out a grenade or use the Scorpio and give debuffs. But that is Perfect Vanguard, and that shows up on the Point Man named Heligard chest piece. One of the best support talents in the game. And here we go. Last 2. Obliterate and Intimidate. Obliterate is probably one of the best damage talents to use right now in the game for chess pieces. This is, in my opinion, one of the best, I would say top tier, maybe even top 2, top 3 talents to use right now in the game for damage. The reason is that the last biggest update, being Project Resolve, made this talent double the duration. So Obliterate used to only work for 5 seconds. Now it works for 10 seconds. Now, I was telling you with those backpack talents earlier that the duration is what makes or breaks a talent. Obliterate with 5 seconds was not long enough. However, 10 seconds is perfect. It truly is. 10 seconds is like the sweet spot of an encounter, because that gives you time to build up that stack and that gives you time to use that stack. Really good, really strong, and they buff this talent so you can get 25% weapon damage, and it's for double the duration now of 10 seconds. And finally, Intimidate. Now I'll put on the Intimidate build for the last time. There we go. This is my Intimidate build for legendary content. And the reason why I wanted to show you this combination is because it works perfect with Adrenaline Rush. Now remember, Adrenaline Rush will give you bonus armor whenever you're within 10 meters of an enemy. Well, Intimidate does the same but different. So whenever you're within 10 meters of an enemy and have bonus armor, you get weapon damage. Which, with Adrenaline Rush, if you're within 10 meters of an enemy, you immediately get bonus armor. So this talent goes hand in hand with that backpack talent. So using the two together is a no-brainer because they both work together seamlessly. Now, what makes Intimidate so strong right now in the game? It's another talent that was yet changed with Project Resolve. So with the last, couple updates, Project Resolve, this talent got a rework. It's not a rework to make it more lethal, but it was a rework to get you to gain these stacks faster. So what do I mean by that? It says here in the talent that while you have bonus armor, you gain one stack per second up to 9. So within 9 seconds, you have 36% damage. And that will keep proccing and keep, activating because of the Adrenaline Rush. So as long as you're near enemies, you're going to have this activated, which is going to give you a huge oomph of damage just right out the gate. Really, really strong. Highly recommend. And in fact, way back in year 2, we used to have a Intimidate Adrenaline Rush meta until they reworked Intimidate. But reworking it back the way they did kind of made this talent come back as well. And it's a really strong talent to use right now. But that's it for me, everyone. That was a long one. I know I'm going to end up losing my voice after this one, but it was well worth it. This is all of the best talents to use in the game right now. I went over all of the weapon talents, all of the exotic talents, all of the exotic gear talents, and finally, all of the backpack and chest piece talents to use right now in the Division 2. Now, if you found this video helpful or informative in any way, shape, or form, please hit that thumbs up. Support the channel by subscribing. We are here to help out the community, and that is you, the community. So make sure you ring that notification bell. That way you don't miss any of my daily Division videos. And yeah, well, I guess that's it for me. So take care of yourself. Enjoy the rest of your day. And I'll see you in the next one. I'm Kamikazevondoom. Peace out.